Welcome to Restoria, your cozy corner for gentle bedtime stories. My name is James and I'll be your host tonight. Every night, we bring you peaceful tales designed to calm your mind and help you drift off into a deep, restful sleep. So snuggle in, close your eyes, and let the story begin. The story tonight is called The Light Between Windows. Chapter 1. The cherry trees bloomed. Helena lived in a small, pale house where spring always arrived with a hush. Outside her bedroom window, a row of cherry trees stretched their limbs toward the sky, their buds just beginning to open. The air smelled faintly of laundry, soap, and new leaves. She was a quiet girl who liked soft mornings and books with folded corners. That morning, the light came in warm and slow, spilling across the floor like something poured carefully. It was the day she turned 16. A quiet sort of light filtered through the curtain spale and gold, like warm milk poured over linen. Outside her window, the cherry trees stretched their limbs, tiny blossoms hesitating at the edges of opening. The world was slow and sweet that day, the kind of morning that didn't speak loudly but hummed gently in the background, like the soft clinking of teacups or the muffled footsteps of someone padding through the kitchen. Elena sat up slowly in bed, the cotton sheets cool against her legs, and let her eyes adjust to the light. Her room smelled faintly of lavender and laundry soap. Somewhere downstairs, her mother was singing in a voice just above a whisper, the tune soft and familiar. There was no rush, no clatter, only the slow exhale of spring easing itself into the house. Breakfast was warm bread and strawberry jam. Her father made her tea, spooning honey into it with the care of someone who'd done it for years. The three of them sat at the small kitchen table, the radio murmuring a melody beneath their quiet conversation. No balloons, no candles, just the comfort of a morning where everything felt exactly right. After the last sip of tea, her parents exchanged a look. A flicker of mischief passed between them like a spark on kindling. Her mother reached for her coat. "Come on," she said, her voice laced with something secret. The walk took them past blooming hedges and open shop windows. The air was cool but kind, carrying the scent of pastry and damp stone. Elena walked between her parents, their presence a steady rhythm on either side of her. They turned a corner, then another, until they arrived at a narrow alley tucked between a flower shop and a bakery, where the smell of cinnamon and lilac mingled like old friends. The sign read, "Willow Lane Shelter." Inside, it was warm and still, the kind of place where voices naturally drop to a hush, as if out of respect for the quiet heartbeat of small creatures. Sunlight came through high windows and landed in soft puddles on the wooden floor. A few animals dozed in corners or peeked from woven baskets, their eyes curious but unbothered. It didn't take long to find him. In the back corner of the room, nestled in a fuzzy blue blanket, was a tiny gray kitten with white paws and half-closed eyes. He was small enough to fit in both her hands. His breathing was slow and steady, and when she bent down, he opened his eyes just a little long enough to meet hers, then closed them again like a promise. She named him Milo. That afternoon, the two of them sat curled on her bed, the scent of spring wafting in through the open window. Milo slept with one paw across her wrist, a small vibration in his chest that she felt more than heard. Elena read a dog-eared book beside him, the pages whispering as she turned them. The light shifted as the day moved forward, and neither of them noticed. The sun dipped low behind the cherry trees, casting long shadows that danced across her walls. The blossoms, now fully open, swayed with a breeze that carried in the scent of petals and soil. In the stillness, Milo stretched once and tucked himself closer. Elena smiled without thinking. It was the kind of smile that came from the inside out. Outside, the world moved quietly forward. Inside, the soft thrum of a kitten's purr wove a new rhythm into the fabric of Elena's days. And so it began, without ceremony. Just a girl, a kitten, and the gentle beginning of everything. Chapter 2. Settling In. The first few days after Milo came home passed like a soft breath, barely a ripple in the rhythm of Elena's world, and yet everything felt subtly changed. Mornings began earlier now, stirred by the sound of quiet paws padding across the hardwood floor. Milo moved with kittenish clumsiness, stumbling occasionally over his own tail or slipping on the rugs, but each moment was wrapped in stillness. Elena laid out a small fleece blanket for him beneath her window. It became his favorite place almost immediately. From there, Milo watched birds flitting across the cherry tree branches, eyes wide but never darting, just calmly tracking their flight. The window was often open a crack, and the breeze brought in the scent of new leaves and far-off rain. She adjusted her routine without realizing. The kettle clicked on earlier. Her footsteps grew quieter. Her voice softened, though she was never loud before. When she studied, Milo curled against her calf or on top of her open notebook. She never minded. In the evenings, the two of them shared the quiet. She'd sit on the rug with a book or a pencil in hand, and Milo would stretch out beside her, belly to the warm floor, one paw occasionally twitching as he dreamed. The house itself seemed to lean into their rhythm. The old clock ticked slower. Or maybe it just sounded that way. Even the refrigerator hummed like a lullaby. One afternoon, rain whispered against the windows. Not a storm, just a gentle hush that made the whole room feel closer. Elena lit a candle on her desk, and the soft glow flickered against the glass. Milo climbed into her lap, his fur damp from a brief jaunt to the back door. He smelled like rain and dust and something small and clean. They sat like that for an hour. She didn't notice time passing. Her hand rested on his back, rising and falling with each tiny breath. The candle burned low, and the rain softened until it stopped. That weekend, Elena rearranged her bedroom. Not out of necessity, but instinct. She moved her bed closer to the window and placed a basket for Milo right beside it. She replaced her old desk lamp with a softer one, the kind with a shade that turned everything honey-colored. When the light was on, the room looked like a painting left out in the sun. Every detail now had a layer of gentleness. the folded blanket at the foot of her bed, the books stacked by color on her nightstand, the mug of tea left steaming beside a journal, and always, somewhere in the frame, Milo sleeping, stretching, blinking slowly from a patch of afternoon light. On Sunday morning, she woke early to the sound of birds. Milo was already at the window, tail flicking slowly. He didn't meow or scratch, just watched. Elena joined him without a word. They stood together, side by side, as the sun pulled itself over the rooftops. The cherry trees had begun to shed their blossoms. Petals drifted down like lazy snow, catching on the breeze. Elena watched one land on the windowsill, then flutter off again. Milo's ears flicked once, then stilled. Everything was quiet. Everything was enough. Chapter 3. A year of small things. The seasons turned gently that year, as if trying not to disturb anything in Elena's quiet life. Spring melted into a pale, warm summer, the kind of summer that never blazed but glowed, soft around the edges. Mornings arrived with open windows and the sound of cicadas far off in the trees. Evenings faded slowly, light lingering on the walls like the last notes of a lullaby. Milo grew, though not by much. He remained small and light-footed, more shadow than weight. But his presence deepened. He wasn't just a kitten anymore, he was part of the pattern. Elena's days, though still young and in flux, began to settle into a rhythm shaped around his quiet companionship. She started keeping a journal not of grand thoughts or secrets, but of little things. What the sky looked like at 6:43 a.m. How the tea tasted when she used cinnamon instead of honey. The way Milo's ears tilted when she played Debussy on the old piano in the living room. Some entries were only one line, others just a date and a doodle. But each page was soft and steady, like footprints in damp earth. During long afternoons, Elena would lie on the floor with her legs stretched toward the window. Milo curled on her stomach or behind her knees. The house made gentle sounds, floorboards creaking, the wind breathing through leaves, the occasional sigh of a distant car. She learned to listen for those sounds, to let them settle over her like a blanket. When autumn arrived, it came on quiet feet. The cherry trees went bare slowly, one leaf at a time. Milo began sleeping closer, seeking warmth. Elena took to wearing thick socks and lighting a small lamp on her nightstand, the kind with an amber glow that made her room look like late afternoon no matter the hour. On colder nights, she'd boil water for tea just to wrap her hands around the mug, and Milo would rest his chin on her arm, purring faintly. No big events marked the year, no sharp turns or loud moments. Just small things, baking bread and watching it rise, collecting leaves between the pages of her notebook, finding a feather on the windowsill one morning and placing it gently in a drawer. These things stayed with her longer than she expected. She painted one wall a soft green. It reminded her of moss and quiet forests. She rearranged her books again, this time by how they felt to read. Milo watched her from a sunny patch on the floor, blinking slowly, his tail brushing against her toes as she moved. One evening, close to the end of the year, Elena sat in her room as snow began to fall for the first time. It came in soft waves, each flake part of a silent procession. The streetlights outside made the snow glow faintly, like powdered gold. Milo jumped onto the windowsill, now a little more graceful, though still curious. They watched together. She didn't write anything that night, just sat with a blanket around her shoulders, and Milo nestled beside her hip, warm and very still. The snow fell for hours, and they stayed there, side by side, breathing softly, living a whole year in small, beautiful pieces. Chapter 4. The apartment with the sunrise window. The day Elena moved into her own place, the sky was overcast, but the air held the promise of something clear. The kind of light that doesn't shine, but hovers gentle and gray blue, like a soft breath waiting to warm. The apartment was small, nestled at the top of a narrow staircase that creaked kindly under her steps. The door stuck slightly when it opened, but it made a pleasant sound, like wood greeting wood. Milo stepped in first. He sniffed the air, ears twitching forward, tail raised in cautious confidence. He walked the perimeter, pausing at the corners and behind the doors. Elena let him lead. She stood for a while in the middle of the room, her boxes still sealed, her hands loose at her sides. Outside the window, clouds shifted slowly across the sky. It took no time for the space to feel like theirs. The furniture came in pieces, hand-me-downs, and thrifted finds, but each object found its place with quiet certainty. A low couch by the radiator, a bookshelf next to the window, a small rug in the center, soft and sun-faded. The sunrise window was the best part. It faced east, just above the rooftops, and each morning, light poured through it in long ribbons, not harsh or insistent, just slow and sure, like it belonged there. Milo made it his throne. He'd perch there at dawn, paws tucked under him, watching the city wake up. Elena often joined him, blanket around her shoulders, mug of tea in hand. The two of them would sit in the hush before the world stirred. She painted the walls pale linen, hung a string of warm lights across the ceiling. She added planstony green ones that clung to terracotta and stretched lazily toward the sun. Milo would nap under the tallest one, a fern with long, draping leaves, as if guarding a secret garden. Evenings were their own kind of ritual. The kettle would whistle. She'd set a record spinning low and slow, and Milo would circle twice before settling into his spot beside her on the couch. Sometimes she'd read, sometimes she'd write. Other times she'd simply sit and let the quiet hold her. The apartment seemed to breathe with her timid at first, then full. One night, she invited her parents for dinner. She cooked something simple, something that smelled like rosemary and lemon. The table was small, but the light made it golden, and Milo rubbed against their ankles before curling under the heater. Her father brought flowers, her mother brought bread. They left with smiles and soft voices, and Elena stood in the doorway long after they disappeared into the hallway. Milo blinked up at her from his usual place by the window. "We're okay here," she whispered. On weekends, time slowed even more. She'd leave the window cracked just enough to let in the sound of birds, and Milo would chase dust motes in the sun. She learned how to listen to silence again, the kind that isn't empty but full of soft, invisible things. Like the ticking of the wall clock, the stretch of Milo's legs as he rolled onto his back, the clink of a spoon in a teacup. On one such morning, with the light slanting just right and a breeze making the curtains billow gently, Elena wrote in her journal, "This is how peace settles. Not all at once, but slowly, softly, like a cat learning the shape of a new home." Milo pressed against her side as if in agreement. Chapter 5. Late nights, long lights. Winter deepened with a soft persistence. The mornings arrived slower, more hesitant, and the sky often stayed the color of unspun wool. Elena's routine folded gently around the darkness. Her early college classes meant quiet, lamp-lit morning steam curling from her tea. A wool sweater slipped over her shoulders, and Milo yawning wide from the blanket-covered chair. The sunrise came late, sometimes not at all, but the apartment stayed warm. She placed a second rug beneath the desk where she studied and brought home a small lamp that glowed amber like the inside of a seashell. Milo took to curling underneath it, paws tucked beneath him, eyes half closed as though absorbing every bit of light. Her schedule grew heavier, that season lectures, papers, the slow, thoughtful work of growing into something new. But still, everything moved gently. She made space for stillness. Every evening, after dinner, after notes were reviewed and pencils set down, she'd light a candle and stretch on the floor beside Milo. Sometimes she'd play soft instrumental music, piano or violin, or the quiet hum of distant synth they'd simply be. It became a ritual, the last light of the day, the flicker of flame, the sound of her cat purring low and steady. During finals week, when the city outside seemed frenzied with urgency, Elena's apartment stayed quiet. She brewed herbal tea in small batches and kept Milo close, his quiet presence a reminder to pause. He'd press against her side during long readings, his breathing a soft metronome. She didn't rush, she didn't panic. She worked in a rhythm all her own, and when it was all done, she took a walk in the snow. Milo waited by the door when she returned. There was a night near the end of that term when she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were too awake, filled with ideas and questions that tugged at the edges of her calm. She stepped out onto the small balcony just past midnight, wrapped in a blanket. The sky was cloudless and full of stars. Breath fogged the air. Below, the streets were silent. She stood there for a long while, until the cold reached her toes. When she came inside, Milo was sitting in the hallway, as though he'd been waiting the whole time. He didn't follow her to bed immediately. Instead, he sat with her in the kitchen while she warmed milk and stared out the window. Eventually, they moved to the couch, She read a chapter of something old and familiar while Milo curled beside her hip. The world didn't demand anything from them. They just were. It became one of her favorite nights, though nothing much happened. January passed with slow sunsets and long shadows. Milo began sleeping more, draped over warm places like poured cream. Elena didn't mind. She understood. Winter made everything slower, softer. She gave in to it. One morning, she awoke to find Milo asleep at the foot of her bed, one paw stretched out toward the dawn. The light was faint, almost shy, but it reached his fur like a kiss. She reached for her journal and wrote, "It's not about how much happens. It's about how much matters." And then she put the pen down and watched the sky grow lighter. Chapter 6. Quiet Holidays. December came in softly, without frostbite or noise. The city outside Elena's window strung up lights in quiet celebration, nothing loud or blinking, just simple glows in windows, warm bulbs around doorways, soft wreaths hung with care. Her apartment felt like a cocoon. The air was always scented with something faintly sweet vanilla, orange peel, sometimes cinnamon, and Milo's fur seemed to gather light wherever he went. She didn't travel that year. Her parents understood. The semester had taken her energy in long, slow pulls, and she wanted rest, not movement. Instead, they mailed a box wrapped in brown paper and twine. Inside were a jar of her mother's spiced preserves, a knit scarf in the exact blue of winter skies, and a folded note. "Take good care of your corner of the world. We love you." Elena read it with a hand resting on Milo's back. His purr rose like steam from a cup, subtle and steady. She marked the days with small things. On the first Saturday of the month, she hung paper stars from the ceiling, each one made with quiet patience and folded edges. They turned slowly with the heat rising from the radiator. On the 9th, she made gingerbread and played old songs on the record player, dusty jazz and soft winter lullabies. Milo batted gently at the cinnamon stick on the counter but didn't knock it down. In the evenings, she knitted, a little badly, but with heart. Just a small scarf, the yarn thick between her fingers. She wasn't sure who it was for. Maybe for herself, maybe for the future. Milo sat beside her, occasionally pawing at the yarn before curling up again, his nose tucked beneath his tail. Snow came again. Not in storms, but in sheets of silence. It muffled the streets and coated the windowsills, and Elena felt the world settle. She didn't feel lonely. There was no emptiness in the quiet. She wrapped herself in a blanket and watched the snow drift down, one flake at a time, and when she looked away, she saw Milo, half asleep, eyes blinking like soft lanterns. On the evening of the 24th, she lit all the candles, not for tradition, not for ceremony, just to fill the room with warmth. The windows reflected the golden glow, and shadows danced gently on the walls. She made herself a small meal, roasted root vegetables, a little bread, a cup of cider warmed on the stove. She set a place for herself and a tiny dish beside her for Milo. with a bit of cream. They ate in calm. No clinking cutlery. No words. Just the quiet joy of enough. Later, she sat on the floor beside the tree she'd crafted from twigs and string and a few gathered pine cones. It wasn't grand, but it suited the space. She held a mug in both hands and leaned her head back against the couch. Milo climbed into her lap, circled once, and settled. His purring was soft and constant. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, everything glowed. Chapter 7. The same sunlight. Years passed in the way soft water passes over stone patiently, with grace. Elena finished school. She started work at the little library tucked between the river and the bakery, where she wore sweaters with sleeves too long and brought Milo's fur with her on her coat like a quiet signature. The apartment stayed much the same. She changed curtains once, repainted the kitchen a lighter shade. The plants grew taller. Milo slowed down. He no longer leapt onto windowsills with the same spring, but he still made his way there, one careful paw at a time. Elena placed a footstool beneath the window to make the climb easier. His eyes were still bright, though his naps stretched longer, and the fur beneath his chin had turned white like snow that stays. She adjusted easily to the change. Mornings moved slower. She woke with the sun, brewed her tea with a steady hand, and sat with Milo at her feet, brushing him gently as the city stirred beyond the glass. They didn't need conversation. The rhythm of each other's breath was enough. Some nights, she would find herself on the balcony again. The city had changed, new lights in the skyline, new shops down the street, but the stars still blinked patiently overhead. Milo would watch from the doorway, too old to join her outside, but present just the same. She'd wave her fingers toward him and he'd blink slowly, his way of saying, "I see you. I'm here." Their life was made of small, repeating joys. A patch of sun on the floor, a new book tucked beside the bed, a weekend morning with rain drumming gently on the roof, and a kettle whistling into the silence. Elena no longer marked the seasons with big events. She noticed them in other ways: the return of birdsong, the smell of wet earth, the way the light shifted through the curtains at different times of year. Milo felt those changes too. She saw it in the way he moved toward warmth, the way he chose the same old spots, the way he listened with his whole body. One quiet morning, no different from the others, Elena sat cross-legged on the floor with a blanket draped across her shoulders. Milo was curled beside her on the rug, his breathing slow, his body warm. She reached out and rested her hand gently against his back. They stayed that way for a long time. She thought of everything they'd shared: books read and nights endured, windows watched and quiet celebrations made of candles and simple meals. He had been her constant, not just a pet, not even just a friend, but part of her own heartbeat, woven gently into her every day. Outside, a breeze lifted the curtains. The cherry trees somewhere far beyond, down the old street in front of her parents' home, would be blooming again. She could almost smell them. Milo shifted just a little, and Elena pressed her palm lightly against his side. Still here, She smiled, slow and full. The same sunlight that had touched her window the day she brought him home now warmed them both again. Time had passed, but the warmth remained,